Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. In today's episode, Erin Poyant, founder of HATTR NextGen and senior manager of education and awareness for the Amyloidosis Research Consortium, will share her approach to discussing her carrier status to members of her family, what it means for them, and the overall importance of being a good communicator and historian for your family when it comes to accurate documentation of physical health and genetic conditions like hereditary amyloidosis. Erin, it's great to have you back. Welcome again. We learned during the last time you joined us that you're a carrier of the V122I mutation that can put you at risk for developing the rare and serious condition of hereditary amyloidosis, just like your father. Learning this must have been difficult for you.
Hey, Mackenzie, great to be back. Yes, it was. It was overwhelming to know that I was a genetic carrier of a disease that ultimately took my father's life. It was impossible not to think of almost every challenging moment in my father's journey and saying to myself, am I next? And if so, when? It was an intense feeling that I had lost control. And what complicated that further was how do I tell my family when this topic is already so painful for everyone?
Of course, I can only imagine the thoughts that must be racing through your mind in a situation like that. The fear, thinking about how do you even begin to move forward. So, why do you think it's important to inform a family, especially when hereditary amyloidosis is considered a rare disease?
Hmm. The easy answer to this is part of a short content series I post with HATTR NextGen. It's called the ABCs of Amyloidosis, the word being informed. I strongly believe that an individual should have enough unbiased information available to them to feel that they are able to make a decision that is best for them and their future. There is a bit more complicated answer though. As we know, rare for the V122I mutation still means that 3 to 4% of the Black individuals living in the United States carry that mutation. Whether or not they will definitely develop active disease is unknown. But what is known is that if you are a carrier, you can pass it down to future generations or possibly to be an issue for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to know that hereditary amyloidosis is passed down through families, typically in an autosomal dominant fashion. And this just means that if one parent has a mutation, there's a 50% chance of passing it to your children.
Yes. And think of this. According to research published in JAMA, it was identified that carriers faced a substantially increased risk of heart disease and death that is estimated to contribute to a loss of life cumulatively equaling nearly 1 million years in Black Americans over the age of 50. Knowing this, I think it would be irresponsible for me not to try to prepare my family, rare or not.
Absolutely. That's an astounding number. And it makes sense, but I'm sure the approach is still challenging for many people in your circumstance. Perhaps you could share kind of any strategies that were effective for you and your family.
Yeah, sure. Before we move into the key points, I just want to mention that it's important to remember that every carrier's personality and communication style will be different. So, what is working for me may not work for you. Work to find what is the most comfortable. Also, every family has a different dynamic. So, work with, not against the culture of your family. Beyond that, understand that you won't likely be able to have a, one size fits all delivery to all loved ones as they may be in different places with it emotionally, and that is 100% okay. So where do we start?
That's a great point you make. So let's start by discussing the conversation with your family members having genetic testing. As we know, genetic testing can identify family members who are at risk, allowing them early intervention and monitoring. So it would seem like this is critical information to deliver to family members.
Yes. And well, for me, I was fortunate that my dad and his team had already laid the groundwork for informing my immediate and extended family about their risk. And his children, his children, we were verbally told from the time of his diagnosis. For his extended family, he conveyed the information as best he could through periodic phone conversation. So my conversations were a bit different with my immediate family. It's more of a gentle periodic reminder that the advances in research and medicine since dad's passing may be a beneficial reason for you to consider getting testing yourself. And they can use that information to decide what is best for them. In cases where you're the first in the family with this status, or you're not sure what to say or not to say, you can reach out to your amyloidosis treatment center or a genetic counselor to help you develop a dialogue, whether written or verbal, to explain the meaning of being a carrier and what that means for your family in language that is easy to understand.
That's something that's so important because everyone has kind of a different understanding of medicine and the language surrounding it. So being able to reach out to a center that really specializes in the disease, I think is really important. But you mentioned genetic counseling, which is absolutely essential to helping families understand their risks, how the disease is inherited, passed on, and the implications of having such a disease. So how does that sort of thing factor into your conversation?
Yeah. And may I just add that you can support families in making informed decisions about testing in general. But for me, I was able to go through a no cost genetic testing program that offered free pre and post counseling at the recommendation of my father's team of doctors. This was so helpful to me to cope with any anxiety regarding the testing itself and the potential result. So, if a family member is open to the idea of testing, you might want to consider supporting them with researching their current options for no or low cost testing, which I should stress pre and post counseling as well. Ethically, this should really go hand in hand.
Absolutely. It's really wonderful to know that these programs exist, particularly at no or low cost to families. I mean, even more importantly, the fact that they can offer counseling regardless of the result, both before and after, I think can help reassure patients and their families that that may be the reason that tips them over the edge to decide to get testing. Because it's one thing to simply get a result and left to interpret it on your own, but I think it's a completely different situation to know that you'll be supported throughout the whole process, particularly to help people develop a sense of confidence, right? That they have the information, they have the resources that they need to be able to deal with a life altering diagnosis, not just for you, but for your family moving forward.
Yes, and that there is somebody there with them along the way that they feel supported. Ultimately, a person's decision to test is an extremely personal decision. And I feel as a family member, although I may feel conflicted, is not my role to tell them what they have to do. It isn't to empower them by providing accurate information and foster the concept of open, comfortable dialogue with me where they can take the lead.
Yeah, so you're touching on another key point here, and that's accuracy, right? Keeping accurate documentation of your family medical history is so critical, right? It helps future generations understand, right, the likely age of onset for the disease that runs within their family. And for most family members who carry the V122I mutation, if they do become active, it can allow their healthcare team to really be prepared and stay ahead of the disease, so to speak.
For sure. I think detailed medical records can provide invaluable information about familial patterns and symptoms, which could guide early diagnosis and intervention. It also ensures that crucial information is passed down through generations. Although I likely had ancestors that passed on amyloidosis, like my dad, for my family, dad is the first because we have a documented genetic testing and diagnosis for him. This is so important to me because I do not ever want any future generation of mine to have to start from square one or have a delayed diagnosis and a poorer outcome due to being unaware of family history.
So how do you do your best to ensure that? What's the key? What's the secret?
Let's see. For my family, there are two things that I try to consistently do. The first is after each of my annual appointments, I verbally and concisely relay critical details of that appointment so as not to overwhelm anyone. This is really only to keep an open dialogue, though. It's not really sufficient to retention. The second would be, let's say, about a year and a half ago, I realized that there needed to be a better record. My chart wouldn't work because that was really only accessible to me electronically and wonder if I'm gone. So, in fact, the green binder was born. It's a story of sorts that starts with dad's genetic testing, then mine, and subsequently it is divided by a hard copy packet of information for my annual visits that I request to be sent to me every year.
Erin, I mean, that's such a simple and effective tool. And I think our listeners could really easily replicate that with any disease, any genetic disease to help communication in their families. I mean, just so effective. So, would you mind sharing what you see as the framework and kind of how you organize such a book?
Sure, I think everybody will have their own thoughts as to how what would benefit them the most, but I could give you like a basic outline. And so for my book, it starts with the basic personal information. So just my name, my date of birth, and the contact informations for my primary care physician, my genetic counselor, my amyloidosis team. And from there, it kind of moves on to the genetic testing and diagnosis for all of my relevant family members that I'm aware of. So the genetic testing results, the date of testing, the name of the test used, and the results, laboratory reports. And if a diagnosis is applicable, then that as well would be added to the binder. In my case, my binder starts with the testing and diagnosis of my dad. He is what is called the proband or the starting point for genetic study, and then it moves on to me.
Yeah, just for those who may be unfamiliar with the term proband, it's defined by the National Cancer Institute as the first person in a family to be identified as possibly having a genetic disorder and who may receive genetic counseling or testing. The person may have a condition that's thought to be inherited or may be concerned about the risk of developing a genetic condition and passing it on to a child. So, as we're diagnosing more and more hereditary amyloidosis for the first time, we'll be hearing this term more and more. And it's just a good thing to know, especially for healthcare professionals to kind of keep in the back of their mind.
Exactly. And it's also essential to document in this section the likely estimated age of onset of disease for a family member. I know we briefly touched on that earlier, but even if they received an actual diagnosis later on the disease, this age of onset is important. So my father's healthcare team estimated his age of onset to be approximately 53. This is important for future generations as they should ideally begin observation some years prior to this date. And so from there, after the genetic testing component of the binder, we move on to basically just the annual follow up documentation. Yearly after my annual appointment, I request the written packet of information that was documented as part of my 2 to 3 day evaluation by my amyloidosis team. And this is added to the binder and organized by year. So things such as the visit notes, what providers saw me, any discussion, any changes in my health status, the laboratory and imaging reports, the type of reports and results, any treatment update. So medication or therapy that I'm on, any treatment plans, any side effects that I could potentially have had. And after that, then we move on to, I guess, family history. This will often be included in the annual packet as well. Um, but if not, it's recommended to regularly update changes. And by this, I mean changes in your overall family's health history, any new diagnosis of amyloidosis in family members, any genetic testing results that you might have for your family members. And after that would come like the correspondence and relevant communication. I found for me, so obviously a lot of the correspondence with the team is within the packet with the amyloidosis team. However, I think the primary care physician needs to be remain looped in. So I find that I review all of that and make sure that that correspondence goes back to the PCP and I have notes of those conversations. The next section would be educational resources. So, any kind of educational materials on hereditary disease, any relative relevant articles or research findings that you might find helpful for yourself or any family members are kept in the binder. Any support resources, so contact information for support groups like the Amyloidosis Research Consortium or Mackenzie's mission, details of any support services that you've utilized or will continue to utilize in your journey. The last section, this is totally up to you if you want to add, would be legal and financial information. So, like advanced directives, copies of living wills, or durable powers of attorney, any type of financial records. So, costs related to treatment and testing, insurance coverage, and benefits. And then I think finally, it's giving consideration to where you keep this to mitigate the risk of loss or damage. For me right now, that is with all the important papers in the house in a flame retardant lockbox. Overall, I think this eases some of the conversation required with family members. All I had to say to my sisters was, if I am no longer here or able someday, remember the green binder for yourselves, your children, and for my children. It's important. To which they agreed they would. The simple answer, I guess, to this conversation is it's all in the green binder. And I think other than that, the remaining points when preparing family members are try to refrain from pushing conversation past where a loved one is really ready to go emotionally. The second, when possible, remind them that although this can be stressful, there are mental health professionals, support groups, and advocacy organizations that can provide valuable resources and a sense of community. And I think my final advice would be staying informed about the latest in research and treatment, perhaps even consider participation in a clinical trial if you're eligible.
I just love the concept of this green binder. I agree that it's important to keep in mind that every family is different, but I think the thing that's so effective about this strategy is for those who are ready, it's there and they have everything that they need. But for those
Exactly.
who might not be, right, a little resistant, they can get
They
to it
still
when
have
they're
autonomy.
yeah, they can get to it when they're ready.
Hmm.
And I think that's really powerful, right? That's really powerful.
I agree.
So, from our conversations today, I want to kind of lay out the six key takeaways that I think are really important for us. First, being
Mhm.
genetic counseling and testing, right? Helping family members to understand the value of genetic testing and the counseling, right? And support them in finding kind of cost effective ways to go about them. But most importantly, when they're ready, when they're interested. Second, being early detection and monitoring, offering gentle guidance that identifying kind of at-risk family members allows for observation and, if necessary, kind of early treatment intervention before any significant disease or damage can take place. Open communication, fostering empathy and understanding within the family is always important. Four, accurate documentation. And that goes kind of along the lines of deciding how to best keep detailed medical records to make sure that your future generations understand things like the age of onset, the patterns that go along with that, and the condition and how it presents in those that came before them. The fifth point being staying informed, recommending that staying updated on current research and treatments can be valuable to them. And lastly, support, right? Encourage seeking mental health support if that's something that is necessary, and this can include things like support groups and advocacy organizations that do provide really valuable resources and a sense of community for people with diseases like this. So again, thank you so much, Erin. You've kind of shared some really deep and really valuable thoughts about how do you prepare your family and your future generations for a genetic disease and the idea of the green binder. And for all of our
Thank you for having me,
listeners,
Mackenzie.
yeah, of course, it's been wonderful. All of our listeners, you can follow our channel to hear about kind of the future episodes that we have with Erin. She'll talk about other topics like educating family members and some of the community challenge that are specific to the V122I mutation. In the meantime, you can learn more about Erin and all of the great work that she's doing at hashtag HATTR NextGen. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.